This week on the Redeemed Marriage Podcast, we're going to be following up with last week's episode where we talked about 3 things that you should say to your spouse often. And this week, we're going to share with you 3 things that you should just completely avoid saying in your marriage. So stay tuned. Hey, I'm Rusty.
And I'm Heather.
And we're the Bryants, and this is the Redeemed Marriage Podcast.
We are here to encourage healthy marriages, strengthen wounded marriages, and begin the process of restoration to broken marriages.
We aren't licensed counselors, but we are a redeemed couple that loves the Lord and wants to help you journey through this messy, challenging, and fun part of life called marriage. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Redeemed Marriage Podcast. This is Rusty and Heather Bryant. We are excited to be with you here. For us, at least when we're recording this, it's the week before Christmas. So
1 week away.
1 week away from when we're actually recording this. Not sure when you're listening to this, but a lot of you do follow us along as we produce our episodes, and so it may be the week before Christmas for you. So Merry Christmas. We are glad to be back with you to share one more episode before the first of the year. So we're going to take the next 2 weeks off because we typically record these podcasts on Sundays, and the next 2 Sundays are pretty big deals.
Can you believe that next Sunday that Christmas falls on Christmas Day?
Did anybody else catch that? I believe it was last week. It may have been 2 weeks ago. And Heather said, this year, Christmas falls on Christmas Day.
And neither one of us even called it.
No.
But we have just, a plethora of sweet friends that like to point out when we mess up things like that.
Thank you to our listeners, because that makes it a lot more fun for me when you point it out and not me.
But Christmas does fall on a Sunday.
Falls
this
on a Sunday.
Year,
So,
and New Year's Day falls on
and
a
New
Sunday.
Year's. Yep. So the next 2 Sundays, we're going to take a break so we can hang out with our family. And hopefully you'll go back if you just haven't caught up. I mean, this is our 79th episode, which is kind of crazy. So I'm going to guess that there's quite a few of our listeners who have not listened to 79 of our
absolutely.
episodes. So go back and catch up over the next couple of weeks when you're driving around, when you're hanging out with your friends, when you're hanging out with your family.
Can we do a drawing? If people have listened to all 70 whatever episodes, they can email us and tell us. And we'll put those people in a drawing for a Redeemed Marriage t-shirt.
What if they lie?
They're not going to lie.
Oh, yeah, we listened to all 79 of those jokers.
But they don't have to go back and listen to season 1 if they don't want to. Because that's before our sound was really good.
Well, yeah. No, I mean, but yeah, if we're going to do a drawing for
that's
something,
true.
what are you going to do? If you've listened to 54 of them, I mean, come on.
Okay, if you've listened to
If you've listened to every episode, send us an email.
Yeah,
there
we'll
we go.
take care of you.
Just send us an email if you've listened to all 79 episodes. All right. So, speaking of surveys, we are going to have one more survey coming up this Friday. So if you have not filled out, did I say survey?
Yeah,
Drawing. I meant drawing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So you can do the survey to get into the drawing. We'll have one more on Friday before Christmas. So if you're listening to this and you don't know when in the world we recorded this, it's the week before Christmas. So the Friday before Christmas, we're going to do the last drawing of the year.
2022.
2022. You need to fill out the survey, and you can get that. You can find that on our website, theredeemedmarriage.com. It's at the very bottom. You'll see it say survey, or we've been posting a lot on social media on Facebook. So go there. All right, let's jump into this because I don't want to spend too much time doing housekeeping stuff. So let's go into the things that you don't need to say. Last week we talked about the things that you need to say often to your spouse, and those were the first one was kind of lumped together. I'm sorry and I was wrong. The second one was I love you. And the third one was what can I do to help? So those are the 3 things that we encourage you to say often, say them all the time, say them all throughout the holidays, say them all throughout the year, just say them. But there's also things that you don't ever need to say. So
I love these. Like, I love these more than the things that you should say.
Well, we kind of came up with these a couple of weeks ago, so we've known that we were going to just share 3. But, man, I started thinking just over the last few days of how much there is that you don't need to say.
Mhm.
And the list, I mean, we could go a lot of different directions with this, and we're going to narrow it down to 3. But I started thinking about stuff like, you're fat. like not criticizing your spouse and their appearance. Like we could say that, but that's kind of a no-brainer,
Sure.
I guess you could say.
Well, and then on the things you do say, like you sent me a text this week. I think it was because of another marriage ministry that we follow, and you said, I just want you to know that you're the most beautiful woman in the world. And I was like, I mean, tell your spouse often how great they are and how much you love them and how much they look good, but don't tell them they look fat.
Yeah, and I just like I'm kind of throwing out a few here before we get started with the real 3 that we're going to say, because I started thinking about and we've done a podcast on an episode on this, but I wish you were more like so and so. Like, don't don't say that. Also, one that I thought about was, you're acting just like your mom, or you're acting just like your dad. Like that unless it's a compliment, that hurts, And sometimes it is a compliment. I mean, our parents are great, but we tend to find the little things that we can point out that could be negative. And so that's not good. I would say just not being critical of your spouse in public, that kind of thing. But anyway, all that to say, there's a lot of stuff that you shouldn't say, but we're going to focus and narrow it down to these things. The first one is stay away from the words never and always.
That's yes, because neither one of those things are ever true. Ever. If you say you never help me with the kids, you never clean up, you never do this, you never say this,
you're always at work, you always go hunting,
Yep, you never go shopping with me, but you always do this. Neither of those words are ever true, because there's not anything you can say. You never do this. I mean, really? They've never helped you with the kids?
Right.
Ever? Or you always go hunting? Always?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Like, no. So, and so those are just words that we need to stay away from, for sure.
Yeah, those are words that I would categorize as falling into the nagging category. And, we've just learned through all of these years of marriage that we've had, and nagging just doesn't get you anywhere. And I think that most couples, they fall into a nagging trap, at some point. I mean, one or the other. And if you're trying to get your spouse to help with something or trying to get your spouse to change, it is not happening by nagging. And when you're saying the words always and never, you're just spinning your wheels or taking steps back. You're never going to move forward. You are never going to move forward. Hey, I'm not talking to anybody. I'm not talking to my spouse right now. I'm talking to you and your spouse if you're listening. But yeah, just avoid those. Those are harsh words. They're strong words, and they're not accurate. They're not true.
And, honestly, if you say it in even a positive sense, they're not, never and always are still not, they're not true words, because it's not
right
accurate.
You always leave the seat up in the toilet.
Yeah.
Always?
Yeah.
Maybe. But probably at least once they didn't do it.
Right. That's right.
Oh, goodness. So avoid the always and the never phrases.
I like that one.
Stay away from nagging.
And I can remember when we were told that. Like, it was like, oh, why have I never thought of that before? And, like, we've both made really conscious efforts not to say those words, and it changes things.
Because I think when we were younger and newly married, we probably said that a lot. And
absolutely.
You
always
really
go over to your friend's house and
it was hurtful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You never tell me. You never make me feel special.
And you may want to say something like that, and have a conversation, but you need to stop and think, how can I have a productive conversation with my spouse about this?
And those conversations don't start with that. It's, hey, when you do this, it makes me feel this, and of course we could go on and on into better ways to have communication without using those words. But I love what you said. Just take a breath, think before you speak, and do it in a respectful way, in a God-honoring way.
Yep.
Yeah, I like that one.
All right, let's move to number 2. So the second word the second thing that you need to avoid is, and we've heard it said, don't use the D word, but it's just avoiding the word divorce.
Yep.
And most of the time, I would think that comes up when couples are having arguments or fighting, and just to throw it out and say, well, if you don't start helping around the house or whatever,
if you do this one more time,
we're just gonna, maybe we should just get a divorce. And a lot of you that are listening to this, you're probably thinking, well, we've said that before, and I mean, they know we're not serious, but when you open the door to that, and just when you say it, it almost becomes, well, that's an option.
Right. That's right.
And if you don't ever say it, then it's not an option.
Correct.
So, I was trying to think about that today, and I mean, obviously you guys that listen to us, our story, that in 2011, Heather was unfaithful, and we went through this marriage crisis, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure did I ever use those words?
You did not. You did not. Matter of fact, as you were sitting here talking about it, the only people that used that word were people outside of our marriage that were giving you ungodly advice. Like, I can remember you saying, so-and-so said, I mean, I should just divorce you. Like, I can remember you saying that, but it wasn't something that you felt. I do remember you saying, I do not feel like God's calling me or is giving me an out for divorce. Like,
I was trying to think if, because one of the things that I know happened, there was a line drawn in the sand, and where I said, this won't happen again.
Right.
You won't hurt me this way. You won't betray me this way. This is not going to happen again. And if it does,
right.
And I may have said, we will get a divorce, and I will fight for these kids, and that kind of thing.
And it wasn't just if you go have an affair. It was the things that can lead to that. If you talk, text, see, come in contact with, try to have, it was all of those things. If you choose to do these things,
then it's over.
Like, you drew a definite line in the sand for me. And I knew if I choose to do these things, then he has every reason to divorce me.
Yeah. But other than that, and again, I don't even know if, you said that we talked about it, but it was me saying that I didn't feel like God was telling me to divorce you.
Right.
And
you did not feel released to do that.
Right. Because I felt like that I needed to fight for our marriage.
That's right.
But I think that, push aside the heaviness and how deep that hurt and that wound is, and we could talk about grounds for biblical grounds for divorce and all that kind of stuff. But even beyond that, I think that people in their marriage, they use the word flippantly.
Yeah.
And, just to try to get a jab in when they're arguing.
Or to scare their spouse into doing, into getting them to do what they want them to do.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
And like you can't use that as a manipulation
Right.
to get your spouse to do what you want or to scare them into loving you better.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like I said at the beginning when we were talking about this, is if you do use that word, even if you're joking or, you don't mean it, you're not ready to file for papers and all that kind of stuff. But if you use that, it's just opening the door.
That's right.
It's just, this is an option.
And don't use your kids in that manner either. I'll take them with me, or they wouldn't want to stay with you. Or, I mean, it's just so many things can be said that are hurtful. And like you said, that's the dark part of it and the deep part of it. But they can also be used flippantly that just, I mean, you just don't want to give the enemy a foothold. Like, don't open that door. It's just not an option.
Yep.
Just make it not an option.
All right, so moving on to our third and final, I guess, thing that you should avoid saying to your spouse. And we mentioned this actually a few weeks ago, but we didn't go into a whole lot of detail. And, maybe there's not a whole lot of detail to go into, but it's just avoiding and not using the phrase, I'm not happy, or I'm not happy anymore,
or you don't make me happy.
And usually that's, you don't make me happy anymore. And I feel like this one is a lot like using the D word. I mean, when you say that you're not happy anymore, well, first of all, your spouse is not responsible for your happiness.
Nope.
Now, obviously, when your spouse is doing the things that they're supposed to do in marriage, they can make you happy. But they're not responsible for your happiness. So when you throw the words out at them and say, you don't make me happy, then all of a sudden the marriage becomes all about you. Like, it becomes, if I say that, it's all about me.
Right.
Like, this marriage is supposed to be for you to make me happy, and you're not doing that. And so I'm not happy.
Yep.
And look, we want everybody out there to be happy in their marriage, and we want you to enjoy your marriage. But it's not your spouse's ultimate responsibility to make you happy.
Right.
And so when you throw those words out, it's just, I mean, that's painful. Like, that's very, like, it just hurts. And like we said it a few weeks ago, I remember early on in our marriage, it was probably thrown out a few times. And man, just like I just think if you said that to me for whatever reason, even if we were just in an argument or whatever, like, it hurts me to even think about you saying that to me.
Yeah. And not only that, but when you say to your spouse, you don't make me happy, you are giving them so much power over your life and over your joy and over your happiness that ultimately is supposed to come from the Lord. Like, your joy is supposed to come from your relationship with the Lord and you serving and you keeping your eyes off of yourself. But when you say to your spouse, you don't make me happy, I mean, you're just giving them such power over your happiness. And that ain't your job. That's not their job to do that. And now, is it more enjoyable? And do you long to have a marriage that contributes to your happiness? Absolutely. That's what we all want. I mean, that's why we do what we do, is to, help couples to find that joy and to find that happiness in marriage. But if you don't have that, you telling your spouse that they're not doing their job is not going to help at all. And it gives them entirely too much control and power over you.
Yeah.
That's not supposed to be theirs.
Well, and really, with all of these things that we've mentioned, I mean, even, when you say you're not making me happy, or I'm not happy in this marriage, or using the divorce word, or using always and never, the response from the other spouse, I don't think, I mean, maybe occasionally they would say, okay, you're right. I'm really sorry. Because the response to something like that is just to turn around and say, oh, yeah? Well, you
Mhm.
this, or,
Mhm.
I mean, if you say, you don't make me happy, well, guess what? You don't make me happy either.
Right.
That's the response. So these things that we're saying not to say, they just don't produce anything positive.
Right.
And so, to avoid them and to go other routes with your communication, instead of taking jabs and nagging and saying these really, really harsh words and harsh phrases that are just going to turn around and make your spouse defensive and say possibly the exact same thing. I mean, look, if you say, you always, well, I mean, I could just as easily say, well, you know what? You always, and that's
Mhm.
how it goes.
Right.
I mean, if you're listening to this, you're like, that's
Yeah,
the way it
I've-
goes. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've done that
Yep.
merry-go-round
That sounds familiar.
several times. So I think that's the big thing, is just to realize that none of these produce anything positive for your marriage.
Right.
And the damage that they cause can sometimes take a long time to heal, because
Mhm.
words are very harmful. And so instead of using these words, if you have a message and a point and something that you need to express as far as feelings, then come up with a positive way of saying it rather than these really dangerous
Right.
words.
Yep. Yep.
All right, so did you think of any other words as we were talking that you were like, we gotta say, just don't say this?
You did so many of them at the beginning that I was like, oh yeah. Like there's a lot of things that you just, and I teach children, and so this is something I say often. But I mean, does it ever get old to hear treat other people the way you want to be treated? Like, I mean, if you think, how do I want my spouse to treat me?
Mm-hmm.
And then you treat them in that same way, you can't go wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just such a solid piece of advice in life, with friendships, with service, just with relationships, with family, but hugely with your spouse. Like, would I want my spouse to say that to me?
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, the other thing I was thinking as we wrap up is I was trying to put into words, and I don't know if I'll do it great, but a lot of the things we talked about today, manipulation just keeps coming into mind. That you use, that I think a lot of times in marriage we use words to try to manipulate our spouse into doing what we want them to do, or what we want them to say, or what we wish that they would, what we wish that they would do. And that's like, you can't manipulate your spouse like that. It's not healthy. It's not encouraging to your spouse. And so you just have to make sure that you're communicating in a better way than manipulation. And I think that a lot of the words that we talked about, a lot of the sayings that we hear from people, or that we've said in the past, I think a lot of those, they definitely tear down. They don't build up. And they're very selfish, because you're trying to get your spouse to say or do something that you want. So,
yeah, that's good. You were just saying how, to kind of wrap it up, it's like, treat people the way you want to be treated. Some of these that I thought about, at the very beginning when I was talking about, don't tell your spouse they're fat, and the things like that. Don't tell them that like their mom or their dad. I was trying to think too, if I was sitting down, we have two boys, one that's 20, almost 21, one that's 16. And, they'll get married, soon, in the next decade, probably, for both of them. And so, I was thinking to myself, well, what would I tell them? Don't ever say this to your spouse. And those were some of the things.
Yep.
And the three that we talked about were three of the big ones, and those would be three that I would definitely say. But there's a whole long list of them, and I was throwing those out at the beginning, and that's kind of where I came up with those. So I'm saying, if you were sitting down with your child and telling your child, look, don't ever say these things to your spouse, that's probably a good place to start too.
That's right.
All right, well, it's time to wrap up. It's time to say Merry Christmas, and it's time to say that we will see you guys in 2023. So if you've got any questions or anything that we can help you with over the holidays, reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. And until the new year, have a great Christmas and a happy new year. All right, bye-bye.